And we're back with all of the designers. Actually, we've got Goober joining us now. Hey,
Hello.
welcome. And so we were just getting into the conversation of Stan's history of having worked with licensed material, and how that relates into what we're doing here with Everyday Heroes. I believe, Stan, you were mentioning how you're not directly working on the licenses with this one, but you are kind of consulting
Right. I
our
mean,
two
a lot of
designers
things are
here.
happening at the same time at this point. There's a lot going on, and I'm I think I'm not arms deep in this, for better or for worse. And so, my time with the game has been to work with Goober and Sig on getting and the editors now are getting involved on getting the main game done.
Yeah.
And in the meanwhile, we're starting to work on some of these licenses, which is super exciting. But now it means I've got surprises coming my way, which is pretty exciting.
And I have to ask, Sid Goober, how's it been working on these licenses? And have you reached out to Stan for any kind of consultation or any kind of advice?
Yeah, well, we're just getting started on that kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
So we've just announced all of that, which is super exciting. But yeah, I mean, we're at this point really just finishing up kind of the main system, and mostly we're just kind of talking about, what we're gonna start doing.
Oh,
We haven't really started designing anything. We're just kind of talking about what's the direction we want to do. What are our options, that kind of thing.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, and the one thing that we've done with the licenses so far is both Goober and I worked on pitches to try and get them, both the ones that we did get and some of the ones that we didn't get. So we had some fun researching these properties and trying to come up with cool adventure ideas and mechanics ideas that we could approach the companies with and say, here's some of the cool stuff we want to do. And so they go, oh, and we hit pay dirt sometimes when there are gamers that work inside those companies, right? And they understand. Sometimes you have to deal with people that don't know a role-playing game from a hole in the ground, and that's where Dave really has to work his magic and try to get them to understand what's happening.
I mean, how do you even go about explaining a TTRPG to somebody who is not at all familiar with the hobby?
It's tough. I mean, especially if you have a short time. Like if it's a friend, you can kind of dive in, and I've given that speech many times. But with a busy executive at a film studio, yeah, you got to be fast and succinct, and it's not easy. Probably the thing is accuracy isn't as important as expediency in that situation. So,
Oh, and what were you saying, Goober?
It's like you're playing make believe, but with dice. I don't know if that's a very convincing way to explain it. But,
so you're telling me it's a craps game? What are you? Yeah, it can be tough.
I can only imagine some of the meetings that you all have to sit into, where you're the game designers. You're the ones that know the system, this game inside and out, and you're in meetings with people who are completely unfamiliar with any aspect of it. that has to be a little frustrating.
My career is kind of built on communication in a way. Like every job I do, one of the things I can do is I can talk to the lay people and talk to the technical people and help bridge an understanding, right? So I kind of actually enjoy that process. I like enlightening and teaching. So
Oh yeah, I mean, you're smooth
kind of my
with
bag.
it. That was a smooth answer. I like that.
That's truth, though. Like.
So I mean, this is. I mean, we're just about at the finish line with the core rule book. I mean, and you started this, pretty much from scratch. I have to ask, what was the greatest challenge to accomplishing this, like to getting this book done? I'm seeing some smiles.
While they think about that, just a second. The fact of the matter is that we are done with initial design. We're done with core design. Editing and development will continue as editing goes on and finds things. And layout will bring its own problems that will bring these guys back in more than they're maybe expecting. So just for people who are thinking, it's not like we're done with them. There's
Right.
plenty for Goober and Sig to keep doing.
You're not out of the woods yet,
document
guys.
is, it has all the things. They might need to be tweaked, but all the sections are there. All the it's a complete playable thing. But yeah, there's a lot of editing to do. I think one of the like biggest hurdles, I guess, in putting together this kind of thing is like what do we include, because when I've done a lot of like little hacks on top of like 5e and stuff. Here's this one kind of module to put on top of a game, but building an entire thing, it's it needs to be all the player stuff, all the rules, all the GM stuff, all the enemies to fight. So deciding what sections to have in the book and where to put them, and how much like extra stuff do we want to put in there for like GM advice and all that. And the answer is a lot, and that's perhaps more than you would expect.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I think for me, the biggest challenge, and I won't say that this game has been really hard in a sense. It's a lot of hard work, but nothing like really frustrating or difficult in that sense. But just getting everybody aligned, right? So we all have a different vision. It starts with Dave's vision of the game, and then that gets filtered through my ideas of mechanics and Goober's ideas for mechanics, and then advice from Jeff and Stan and people with a lot of experience, and trying to meld that. So we're all happy, and the playtesters are happy, and everybody's happy. It's, you can't please everybody with everything, right? But you need to get that compromise, but you don't want it to feel like a mishmash of different people's visions. You want it to feel like a cohesive whole. So melding all these individual patterns into one entity where you don't see all the seams is probably what takes the most concentration. And then every once in a while we run into what I call kind of a hard problem, which means it's a problem that doesn't have one perfect solution, right? You have to make a compromise. You have to make a deal of some kind between 2 or 3 different goals. And those are the things where I say, all right, I got to put my thinking cap on, right? I don't have an immediate solution for this. I've got to really get some tea, get some food, think hard about it, turn it around, look at it from every angle, and then wait for that eureka moment where you go, I got it, right?
I mean, you bring up something interesting here, which is in my conversation with Stan, he mentioned that there are times when you have to make a decision that it's going to leave somebody wanting. Which is, I imagine, one of the more challenging aspects of game design. So, I mean, I love hearing about each one of your approaches to, once you come to that crossroads, how do you just get yourself to make a decision either way?
Guess I could start. A little bit comes down to like who's going to make the decision. So generally speaking, I mean, it's Dave's vision, it's his game. So my first goal is to please him, right? To make sure he's getting the game that he wants. And then once that's satisfied, I'll put in as much of my creativity as I can. I try to be pretty democratic. So if 2 other designers are like, no, Sig, we disagree, I'll be like, okay, well, I'm outvoted, and that's okay. Unless I think they're missing some piece of information, right? But then it's not my job to steamroll them. It's my job to get them that piece of information so they understand where my head's at. And hopefully they will agree. Not that I'm strong arming anybody, but they will come out and go, oh no, maybe you're right. So those moments, you're trying to make sure, at least for me, everybody gets their full input, but yet we don't do something just because somebody wants it, right? Like It's got to be a good reason. So it's that kind of negotiating process, being really open, expressing how strongly we feel about something, because we'll dick over the name of something, right? Some of our longest discussions were like, what do we call this class? And we go around in circles, and I'm just like, man, can we all just agree that there isn't a good one right now? We'll flag it, and at some point we're going to think of something, right? And we'll come back to it, So that kind of process, partly comes from experience doing that in other fields and things too. But for me, that's really important, right? And just everybody's gotta feel good about it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you get 100% of what you're thinking. And you have to listen to other people, right? Like, it's so important that you don't get in headspace. I can be reflexively defensive on an idea. I got to give myself time, right? I'll be, all right, well, let me sit on this one for a little bit. I'll probably like it tomorrow, right? So
we all like our idea best. That's why we have.
Yeah.
That's why we.
Yeah.
But I say my role more often than not is not to get that deep in it, but to be the person that says to Sig or Dave, so this has been tried X other place before, or let me tell you about the problems that this will raise, or if you do that, have you thought about this other thing that it's going to lead? Or wouldn't this maybe be better over there? And then kind of help to be a resource rather than a deciding factor. Though I always have my opinions too, and I'm happy to share them.
And Stan asks us hard questions. Like, that's one of the main things he often does as the producer. He's like, will you be ready with this? Have you thought about this? How are you going to do that? How's this going to happen? What's your thoughts on this? And those questions really make us think and solve problems that need to get solved. So super valuable.
Yeah, and when we run into those situations where what you're calling the hard problems, usually like the bulk of it is what's our goal, not necessarily how are we gonna write this mechanic, but what's the goal of the mechanic. And once we figured that out, it's usually pretty easy to proceed. But in writing a mechanic, like what's more important, that it's realistic, that it's representative of like action movies, that it's simple, that it gives players a lot of choice. And sometimes you can't do all those things, so you just got to figure out like, all right, in this case it's not really that important that this is like realistic, and it's just a tiny little thing, let's make it as simple as possible. Or no, this is really important, and we want to make sure that we get some realism across, we let players make choices, and something like where you just want to make it more complicated, because it's important, and you want it to be kind of front and center. And yeah, like a lot of the discussion is deciding which of those a thing is.
So I asked Sig in our interview about this. I kind of want to bring it back up since we have you here, Goober, which is what was your guiding principle when it came to the monsters or the enemies that were put into this book? I mean, we're dealing with the modern setting, so
Mhm.
you've got a plethora of in real life adversaries to add to, but then you've also got the more extravagant aspects that you could put into this book.
Yeah, so I mean, the approach to deciding like what to put in there was basically, come up with a whole bunch of scenarios. Look at movies, look at, what kinds of like things are people going to be fighting. So you've got your criminals and spies. Gonna need military stuff, and law enforcement, and all kinds of things like that. And a simple set of kind of more supernatural, weirder things. So the approach there to kind of deciding is like, what's like really big and iconic, and something that you can use in a lot of games. And then in terms of like the actual design of the enemies, basically the main thing that I was trying to do with them is make sure that they're each kind of interesting and unique. So you don't just end up with a lot of enemies that are just they have this many hit points and this is their attack bonus, and that's it. Like I want to give them a role in combat. I want to give them abilities that are interesting, make things tactically cool. but also not overcomplicate them, because a lot of what the situation is going to involve is like the player's abilities.
Right.
So monsters don't need a million different special abilities and stuff to be interesting. They need one thing, whether that's they have a million hit points and low defense, and so you just bash on them, or they have one neat special ability that affects their tactics. So yeah, like that's sort of the general kind of vibe I was going for, is both very broad and useful types of enemies, but also they have a very specific kind of combat role.
All right. No, I'm incredibly excited about that, just because there's so many different ways that you could take the modern setting in terms of foes. So that's very interesting here. That's an interesting look at the enemies that we have for everyday heroes. But I'm kind of curious. Um, are you creating new monsters with each new cinematic adventure that comes out?
I
Well,
think we definitely are going to be creating them for each of these things. It depends a lot on what it is. I think each of the adventures is probably going to have their own unique NPCs and everything. But I think for some of them, we're probably also going to include kind of a bestiary type of thing. It's not 100% decided yet, but I imagine something like Pacific Rim, we're gonna want a chapter of kaiju, whereas something like Rambo or something like there might be a few specific special NPCs for the adventure, like here's this named guy who has these weapons and these skills and stuff. But for the most part, if you just want to do a Rambo game, you can use kind of what we've already got. So I imagine the content of those cinematic scenarios is going to vary a lot. Some of them are going to have more feats, some of them are going to have more enemies, some of them are going to have more equipment, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean that's the trick when you're doing licensed properties, is to start with what does your game do, what's your game built to do, and what's different in the licensed property. What does a licensed property bring that is specialized, it's key, that is either beyond what the main game does or has a different take to it than the.
so if you really want monsters, Kong Island's going to be your adventure ticket, right? Because the class we're talking about is called a monster hunter, like a person who specializes in collecting specimens, both alive and in pieces. And they're going to need all kinds of critters to go look for. So yeah, there'll probably be lots of cool stuff in there.
See, that's exactly what I'm excited for. Now, with our core book, everything that you need is in that one book, and I know that there's other systems that benefit from having, like, your player's handbook, your monster manual, and your DM's guide. How do you go about making sure that everything needed to run your game is able to fit in one book? That is a challenge that I'd imagine takes some doing.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that. So there's a few things. Like, we decided pretty early on, we talked about it, and we're like, yeah, we want one book. I like one book games, and Dave does as well. It's cool to have the different tomes and stuff, but for me, it's just, you get this one book, that's the game. You have a lot of stuff added onto it, but I just like that. So yeah, we've got a game master section, and it's pretty big, that really details game mastery. And we've got a kind of a player section that's all about making characters, and then in the middle is the rules, and everybody kind of needs those. So that's the basic outlay of the book, and it's about probably 30 to 40% character stuff, 30-40% GM stuff, and about 20% just the rule set in the middle of all that. And of course there's rules throughout the thing, but yeah, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So as for a challenge, for me, it's a little bit cut the fat. Like, there are games out there, and I don't want to point dispersions because everybody's got their own style, right? But there are games that, to me, have a lot of padding in them, a lot of extra stuff. I didn't want a lot of extra stuff, all the meat, like every bit, pretty morsely. Now, some people are going to like some things and others, especially in the Game Master advice. If you're experienced Game Master, we're trying to teach new people how to be a great Game Master and run modern adventures. So you might not need some of that, right? But it's not fluff. It's there. It's just for different people. So we really tried to not have a whole lot of extra material in there, and that keeps it down a little lean and mean kind of a thing. So that's
And
part of it.
A lot of role-playing games besides D&D are a single book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The what D&D has is like so many different like monsters that they want to spend a whole bunch of time like explaining their ecology and society and all that. So like having an entire book of monsters makes sense for that. And then at the same time, it's building dungeons and stuff is a whole extra thing. Like there's a whole lot of GM stuff in the Dungeon Master's Guide that is very much dedicated to stuff that is Dungeons and Dragons specific. So when it comes to making a different RPG from that, like we don't need to go into a whole bunch of ecology and society for a goon, or a gangster. It's like those are people, it's the real world. Like you understand what those things are. We're not explaining goblin society. We're just, here's some criminals you can use. And we're not, going into detail about rolling up a random dungeon or anything like that, because you're using buildings in the real world. You're using locations in the real world, and there isn't that kind of expectation that you're going to go do a dungeon. Just like the kinds of stories that are going to get told with this don't as much require that kind of a thing.
Yeah, I mean,
So there is a lot that we can just kind of cut because of that.
even if you look at D&D, you could play with just the player's handbook. There are very few things in the DMG that are absolutely necessary. There are a couple of things that you really, really need, but you could play just with the player's handbook. Is it a better experience going forward? Are there more tools for you to use? DMG is a book full of tools, and for different flashy things you can add on, but they aren't the essence of playing the game. They're the essence of the game in a big picture sense, right? You've got what, 70, 80 pages of magical items and artifacts, something like that. I'm not calling that fluff. I'm just saying that you're hand picking what you want out of those things.
Yeah.
The player's handbook, you're using everything in the player's handbook is what you need when you've got a game like ours, which is not a new world. This is basically the world you know. There are fewer things that you need to add in, and it's easier to create one volume that does it. Now, would it be cool to have a book full of that stuff? Absolutely. Are we going to make it for you? Almost certainly. Right?
Yeah, but
does the game need it to launch and get going for you to be able to play 18 different kinds of modern adventures? No, we've got what we need.
Yeah, and if you want to know like the full equipment list for Everyday Heroes, go on to Amazon.com and start searching for products, right? Like our world book is the real world, so we don't have to explain a lot of things. If you had to make a cell phone in Dungeons and Dragons, it'd be quite a few pages to describe what that thing does, right? Like, it'd take a long time. But we don't have to. Yeah, it's a smartphone. Like, and you know what? If smartphones change tomorrow, it's still a smartphone. It just does new things. You know what it does better than we do. So we get to cheat a little bit because the real world is our setting. Not that we're not doing any world building, because we've got iconic characters and just the tone of the way you build a character and the things that are available tell you a little bit about kind of our vision for Everyday Heroes. and kind of, it does have its own stories, and we are going to have these characters, and the characters, you're going to see them again in not the licensed products, but in the products that aren't based on licensed material. So we're building a mythology and the world of everyday heroes, but really the setting is modern day life, and it is an inexhaustible resource of things you can look up about it. So
I mean, I can't believe we didn't
Yeah,
put
just
all of Amazon in the book. How dare you?
Just that what Sig was saying is part that goes back to what you asked earlier about how you decide what goes into the licensed property. It's where does what the movie's take on these things is slightly different than the one that we've got in our core book. The kind of combat you're going to run into in Die Hard is a little different than the kind of combat you're going to run into in Predator. But it's very different than what you'll run into in Aliens, or even something like. I'm
sorry, I'm just imagining John McClane fighting a xenomorph. Mind you, these are ones that we don't have for sure.
Right. No, just as examples of movies, or the Hurt Locker, right? If you're going to go really deep in to realistic military, you're probably going to want to tweak our engine a little because it's built to serve this swath of stuff.
And when we're doing Rambo, we're probably going to look at the period weapons and equipment and things that are involved in that and represent those in the book, even if they're not a lot mechanically different. But for the setting and the feel, we're going to detail some of that stuff for people. Or we're going to say, hey, you can use these stats, but this is what the period weapon is that's like that. I believe in not overwhelming people with detail they need to worry about, but having that detail there for those who enjoy it, right? So I like to do my research and make sure those things are available. The weapons in the core game are based on mostly modern weapons or old weapons that are still in common usage. But for the movie tie-ins, it might be a little bit different. It really depends on the property. For something like Pacific Rim, well, none of that stuff is, it's going to be science fiction cool stuff, right? Stuff from the movie, and some of it maybe we'll get to put a name on it, right? Because it was just something that somebody had, right? But in the book form, it's got to be called something, right? So that'll be fun.
I mean, and that's kind of something that I talked with Stan about, which is there are holes in lore that movie directors, screenwriters don't really have to worry about, but when you're putting pen to paper for some of the stuff in these worlds, it becomes your problem.
yeah Well, and not only our problem, but we got to make sure we do something that they're going to like, right? Because usually with a license, you got to run everything by the license holder, and they got to agree. Yeah, that sounds good. But when you get to invent something new in somebody else's playground and they like it, well, that's pretty cool. I remember just a little anecdote. I wrote a treatment for Reservoir Dogs of all things, and I got feedback from Dave. It said that those guys really liked your pitch. It was like, oh man, that's pretty cool, because I don't think Quentin Tarantino got to see it, right? But somebody involved in the property thought my little story in that world was really cool and fit the theme. So I was like, oh, felt really flattered. So I can't wait to have do something like that, and it's actually going to get in print. Yeah, that'll be great.
God, Reservoir Dogs is such a good movie. But before I get distracted thinking about Mr. Pink,
yeah, I mean, we've got the 8 properties and we got the license for it. I'm super excited, but man, we went through dozens and dozens of different things, right? Writing treatments, imagining what we could do in that world. It was a lot of fun.
Some of them may happen yet, right? Not the first ones. That doesn't mean they'll never happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we ain't closing the doors. We want to do it all, if we can. So
I'd imagine some folks were very wait and see about it. Like, let's let somebody else go first, and then if we like what we see, we'll jump in.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, when you don't get something, you usually don't know why, right? You don't. It's not like they give you helpful feedback, so you do better next time. They're just like, yeah, we're not really interested, and you got to just take it and go for the next one, right? So depends. Yeah, but there's some that maybe still be on the table, and we'll see. We also had to limit it. We were like, well, we can do about 8 to 10 of these things. Right. And so there's probably a couple that we passed up on too, that we just were like, well, these are the best ones we got available out of out of what's been offered. So
Right. And it's
Yeah.
got a timeline, right? We got to figure out what it is. Well, they haven't made their mind up. Guess they're not in season 1.
yeah.
I mean, and that's the other thing though. Like we're doing cinematic adventure season, so we're starting with these first 8 with the understanding that we're going to be continuing this. So
Oh yeah.
I mean, you two are going to be busy for some time.
Yeah.
Is that
I
a
hope
little?
so.
Is that a little daunting? Is it exciting? Like, when you think about that, you're playing in all these different worlds and you don't know who's going to say yes. You don't know who's going to say no. So you really don't know where you're going. Like I feel like that's a much different challenge than writing for, an established world like, Faerun or something like that, where you kind of understand where you're going to be.
It's perfect for me because really my whole life I've had so many different jobs in my life. I love new challenges. Like I thrive on, okay, now here's something completely different that you need to solve, like go. So I love it, right? Like I love that. Like here's a new crazy challenge. That's just my thing. If I do the same thing for too long, I start to get a little sleepy. I start getting into kind of a rote pattern. I like to have a certain amount of stress or the stress of a challenge. So good for me.
I mean, there you go.
I mean, for me, I love adapting stuff. Like I'm constantly, taking settings and figuring out like, how to make that in a role playing game. So like this is basically just what I do all the time, anyways. So mostly I'm just really excited to get my hands on these properties and come up with stuff for them.
I mean, I know that you're like our rules guru. So, when you're seeing all this stuff, do you immediately start putting mechanics in mind, or do what's your process of really turning a world into a game?
Yeah, so the like the starting point is like what is going to be like weird and different about this. And what can easily be kind of slotted into what we already have.
Recording in progress.
So yeah, like at this point, I'm just kind of tossing around ideas, thinking about like, oh, how could we do that? In the past, in terms of stuff like I've made into other things. None of it's been published because, of course, I don't have licenses. But generally, like what systems are going to need to be overhauled? What things can we just add? Can something just be a feat?
Right.
Like does that need to be a class? Does that need to, could that just be a little thing you can add on? Or does this need to be a complete, rewrite of a whole section of rules? So like, I've occasionally done stuff like put Final Fantasy into D&D in older editions. And, most of that is replace the class system, because that setting has a whole bunch of its own classes and everything. But the rules are pretty much just going to be D&D.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the process here is does this setting need a whole bunch of new classes? Does it, is it mostly going to be some feats? Is what's different about it equipment? And, just kind of identifying like what those categories are, and then kind of just start thinking about, how to do those.
Okay. So, was there anything that you started writing that you've had to cut out just to make this core rule book nice and concise in in one book?
Oh yeah. So I wrote this whole profession system, right? Like we spent a lot of time on professions. It's kind of a simple mechanic. And it's just people have jobs, so we need that in the game. And you got to figure out how much money you have, and that's usually based on your work. Professions had to be in there, and at one point I had created a system like, so in the medical profession there were like, you could start out as a nursing assistant and then be a nurse and move up to a doctor and then like a tenured physician and stuff. And so at each level, you would get a higher salary, but then your skills would be a little more specialized and less broad because it had to be balanced. You're going to pick one of these, and you don't want the doctor to just be strictly better than the nurse. So it tended to be the nurse would have a lower salary, a few less skills, but they'd have more ability score points to move around. And I had feats where you could get promotions by taking a feat, and then you would gain like the salary and the skills for the new level of profession, but not the ability scores. And it was a whole thing. I thought it was pretty darn cool, and it kind of simulated a lot of stuff for me. But everyone's like, Sig, like just it's a little much here. Let's just have some categories. And you're like, oh, but okay, I'm gonna let it go. I'm gonna save all that. I got it in a file. It's called extra rules. Anything that doesn't make the game goes in there. And yeah, we got some stuff, and we may use that. It may be a little part of another book or an expansion or something down the road. So it's not gone. It's compatible system, but yeah, I couldn't make it in there, and probably better for it. I think it's a little too complicated, especially one of the early things you encounter making your character. Yeah. So yeah, probably best that it got cut. But yeah, you do. Takes a little grieving process to get over the rules that you don't get in there.
I was just about to be like, that sounds like you put in so much work and it has to go in the folder.
Yeah, no, it's tough, and I'm like,
a lot of that ended up, in what we have, just
yeah,
tweaked and simplified.
Yeah, but I mean, there were. I think we went down from I think I had about 60 or 70 professions down to about 23. So
anyone that's ever worked on a modern game will have some variation of that in the equipment, in the weapons section in particular.
We had a little of that too, not too much, but a little bit. Yeah.
I feel like every game designer has the folder full of the rules that they had to shave off.
Sometimes that becomes a seed that another game will grow out of, or a supplement. Or sometimes you just pull it out 20 years later and go, oh, what could have been?
Yeah. Sometimes the hardest is when they kill your babies. They're like, okay, you need to take some of these weapons out. I'm like, okay, I'll take some weapons out. Oh, but I need this weapon put in. You're like, that one. Why?
How about you, Goober? Was there anything that you had to take out?
The main thing is I had initially just statted up so many animals. Basically just looking at both the list of animals from D&D as well as what else is there. Gonna have a pig and a cow and whatever. But that ended up being a very long section that's pretty unnecessary, and so. At Sig's recommendation, a lot of things have been kind of combined down into there's a bird of prey, there's a great cat, and there's one that I've called a mostly harmless animal, which is I almost called it a harmless animal, but it's it has a bite attack or something. It could do a point of damage. It's not technically harmless, but that's where a cat and a lizard and a raccoon and a squirrel and there's a million different animals that are all basically just they have 1 or 2 hit points.
But if we ever get to Charlotte's Web,
yeah, or yeah. Somebody mentioned Paddington Bear is owned by one of the studios that we're working with, so we can have Paddington Bear Everyday Heroes game, and then we might need some of those critters.
Yeah.
I mean, I was looking and we're just trying to look at some stuff that maybe to cut out, and he had all these great critters in there, and I knew some of them would probably have to go, and I'm looking, I'm like, yeah, frog. Nobody's going to be fighting this little frog. He's not really going to get involved in many combats, but he's a good little frog. Look at that. He's got to swim and he can jump, and he's got Goober's amazing at making these NPCs, and I kind of love them all. They're really cute and great, but they just what are they going to do in the game? Oh, maybe not a lot.
So those live in a document now.
Yeah. So I hope they find a setting to make a comeback. That'd be awesome.
I love the mostly harmless man. I had a game pause for 45 minutes because we were looking for stats on a turtle because one person was adamant that the shell meant that they would be harder to hit, and the other person was adamant that the shell just meant that they had a lot of hit points. So so it's kind of funny.
In either case, the difference is 1, right? 1 point harder to hit, maybe, or 1 extra hit point, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's great to kind of see this on the other side because we were like, how is there no turtle stats? Well, now we know why.
In this case, there are turtle stats. It's mostly harmless animal, and you use the like amphibious variant. You know, like there's a couple. You know, it's this one can fly. This one's nocturnal. There's a few little tweaks you can put on it, but mostly they just like they have a couple hit points, and you know, like you're probably not going to fight them.
Yeah, they're mostly there because people like pets, right? And if you want a little pet, then like we got that for you.
It's just so evil GMs can kidnap your players' pets.
Oh, yeah. Bastards.
So another question that I want to ask is this everyone's first Kickstarter? Have you all done Kickstarters before?
Yeah, definitely not Stan's first rodeo. It is mine. I will admit, I am a bad customer when it comes to RPGs. I think I've backed 2 Kickstarters in my life, and I've been on Kickstarter since it started. So I'm not really a Kickstarter guy, and I've not been on a project that's Kickstarter before, so it's all new to me.
Hey, that just shows remarkable self-control.
This is the first time I've done a Kickstarter from this side. You know, I've backed a few. You know, a couple RPG ones, some miniatures ones, that kind of stuff.
One of my 2 Kickstarters is one of Stan's, so you know.
Awesome. Oh, so I mean this has got to be a new experience for you. You know, what's it like kind of seeing, well, at this point the Kickstarter hasn't even started and we're already close to having 2,000 people sign up. I think we're at like 1,500 plus people who are just chomping at the bit for this to go live. I mean,
they all can't convert.
Here's hoping. Please, if you're watching this, please convert. But I mean, that's got to be exciting to know that, you know, just from the little bits that they're seeing, they already believe in this project.
Oh yeah, you know, when we first started, it's you know, an idea, right? And you don't know what's going to become of that idea. It's a little seed, right? Nothing could happen. Something could happen. And yeah, you know, every step of the way, it's a little more real and a little more there. You know, when the Kickstarter closes, that'll be not the end of the journey, not the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning, or the yeah, you know, but it'll be an important moment, and we'll know exactly, kind of at least for the next year or so, what the future of the game is, right? It's always, every gaming company is a living thing, and it's a rocky road, and so every step is a really important one. So leading up to the Kickstarter, you know, we announced these licensed properties, and I've been hinting at them as much as I can when I do interviews. You know, you really want to tell people, and I'm like, we've got a thing. It's like a secret thing, and you know, honestly, it doesn't excite everybody. There are people who are like, you know, in the playtest, they're like, I don't care about the license stuff. I just care about like core game. I want to play D20 Modern in 5e, right? And I'm like, great, I'm gonna give you that, right? But I was excited about the licenses, so I want to talk about it. Yeah, so it's incredible. I'm now, I feel really confident. Our Kickstarter, we're gonna fund, like, I'm sure of it, right?
Yeah.
Like the level of excitement, the level of interest, you just like, it looks great. Like, how far are we gonna go? I don't know. It depends on how far we get the word out. We don't have, like, you know, some of these guys like Monty Cook Games or something. They've a proven track record and a bunch of fans, and their audience knows exactly what they're going to get. We have to talk to a new audience who doesn't know who we are and what we're doing, and we're brand new, so it's a little tougher. But I think what we're doing is super exciting, and I tell people, like, we are not going half-assed. We're going all the way hardcore. We're a small, scrappy team. But we are not fooling around, right? We built a set of game rules in about 4 months, through blood, sweat, and tears, with a tiny little team. And I'm really proud of what we've done. And the people who've looked at it so far we've gotten great feedback, and people really like it. So
Yeah.
and I only believe we're going to keep going forward, and yeah, it's just going to get better and better. So I hope people will jump on for the ride and show a little trust. And if you support us, we will give back everything we got.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I could say that the socials have actually there's been a bit of a change in the wind. You know, we would always get, you know, a couple of, you know, why is this not GURPS kind of comments, but more and more
Sure.
people are kind of coming around as we show more and more of it. So I think that we're starting to build that trust with the community. You know, and it's nice not to have to explain why we're doing 5e. That's been a nice change of pace. Um, but you know, I think that people are starting to come around, and that was happening even before the license announcements, which was really cool. Um, uh, so I just kind of I always wanna leave off with give you all the chance to highlight an aspect of the system that you're particularly proud of, or highlight something in what you've created here that you know you think will entice folks.
Well, okay, I'll go.
We've all answered this question already, so now we're like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
else?
yeah.
Well,
Give
I'm
me
going to pick a
something.
different one.
Give me
you know.
something else.
Yeah, no. Like actually, right now on Twitter, I've got I'm doing a series every day. It's one of 30 things I think are really cool about everyday heroes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've actually thought of a bunch of things that I really like. So I'm not going to say favorite, but one of I think is really cool that I came up with is the suppressive fire rule. So this is basically what happens when either you're like, he goes, cover me, right? And the guy pulls out his gun. He's like, bang, 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 bang. He's not really shooting at somebody. He's shooting in an area so that the other people don't stick their head out to shoot at their friend, right? It's covering fire, and they keep their head down. The military calls it suppressive fire, so that's what the rule is, and that's more its real name. It also is more what machine guns, like fully automatic weapons, are really designed to do in real life. They are not there to hit somebody with 12 bullets. It usually only takes one bullet to really seriously hurt somebody. So covering fire and suppressive fire is really done to sort of say, you don't dare stick your head up in this area I'm shooting at, right? And that's how our system works. You declare the area that you're covering, and everybody in there either needs to get out of dodge or get hit, right? This becomes your choice. You can either dive for cover, or you get hit by a bullet. And if you decide to run into that while it's happening, you're also going to get hit. So it's like a strategic way to clear out part of the battlefield, let your friends who are melee characters run up forward while you're doing your covering fire. I think it's super cool.
Your search history has to be wild.
Oh yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah.
There's no way you don't have an FBI agent watching your moves, man.
Oh yeah. But that's all right. But yeah, so that's a mechanic I have not seen implemented like that. Now, I have not read all the games in the world. It may be other people have done the exact same thing. But I'm pretty proud of it, and I just got feedback. There's a little people are like, wait, how does this work? What is going on here? Don't I hit them with a bunch of bullets? I'm like, no, that's not how it works. But once they tried it, and then they're like, oh, the lights come on. They're like, wow, this is really cool. Like, it really changes the way the firefight feels, and it feels totally different than like fantasy combat. I'm like, yeah. It should feel different, right? Because it is. So
we've had at least 500 plus something playtests at this point.
Yeah, we had like more than 600 people sign up, right? Not everybody playtested, right?
But, yeah, but playtesters.
But we got a lot of feedback. Yeah.
I mean, that's not that is. I have to ask, Stan, is that normal? How many playtesters are usually involved in games that you've run or you've worked on?
It depends, but I think it's really awesome. This is something that compares well to what the larger companies do. It's not as big as what Wizards will get when they do a big, awesome playtest, but it's in that realm.
Wow.
It's the lower end of that realm, but this is what, when playtesting came up, and I was saying, look, we want to do something that is going to be that kind of game for that many people. We need a whole bunch of people to try it. And I'm super impressed with how the playtesting effort has gone and the number of people we've gotten in. Because you got to remember those 500-600 people probably are 500 or 600 groups, which means that's 4 or 5 times that is the number of people that are playing.
Yeah, that was one of those oh my god moments when Dave told me how many people were signing up. And yes, we don't have a playtest manager.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah, no,
So it's like, yeah, so you're designing the game. It's like, we'd like you to manage the, 500-600 playtesters coming in. Oh god. Now I had help from everybody, right? Like, Noir helped me out, and Goober made up really great scenarios for combat testing and everything. But yeah, I was like, oh boy. But it all worked out really well. So it was a lot of work, but it was worth it.
It boggles my mind that how often and how many people worked on this behind the scenes, and I mean the feedback you were getting.
How often it was Sig and Goober.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, our playtest is probably not the biggest in history, but I bet our playtester to developer ratio is very high.
Like you
Very
guys have
high.
been back to backing everything here, so it's that's why a lot of these questions are just like, how are you still standing? I mean, in comparison to the team that worked on the original D20 Modern, Stan, I have to ask, how many people were involved with keeping or putting that together in comparison to Everyday Heroes?
I mean, you had that core design team of 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there were 2 or 3. I was one of the other people that was involved as secondary designers, and everyone in RPG R&D had the opportunity to participate and to give feedback, and were encouraged to. We had the website team was managing playtests. We had the editing team was already involved. So, I mean, there had to have been. You look at the credits in the book, and this is not a factory kind of, it goes here and passes on. These were all people working for the company at the time. So they were all working on it to some degree, starting very early on and running right up until it went off to the printers.
Oh man, I feel like this is going to be a very fun drinking game. Just take a shot every time Sig and Goober's name shows up in the credits.
In a few places.
All right, well, we're just gonna just about wrap it up here. Is there anything else you'd like to tell our viewers here? Anything you'd like to tell them about the Kickstarter, or we could just sign off here?
I was saying the main thing is to check out the Kickstarter and to share it. Right?
Yes.
One of the things about Kickstarters is they live on word of mouth. Right? If you're already someone that hears us, it's not that we still need to earn your trust and your money, but what we need to do is get to the people who haven't heard us yet. Right? So the more you hear about it, the more you hear that something's cool, share it with friends.
Absolutely. And what were you about to say, Sig?
I was just say, I invite people, if you want to ask me questions about the game, or if you're interested in discussing it. For the time being, I've got a little bit of time, and I like to do that. So if you have questions down below this video, I'll probably wander by, and I'd be happy to answer them, or anywhere else you find me. Happy to talk about it. So, and in return, please share and enjoy.
Absolutely.
And I'm just super excited for this to be as big as it is, and to be to build on it, I guess. I think we've really put together something that is going to be really great to not just play initially, but also to kind of develop for and continue making stuff for. I'm excited to make more classes and make more feats and figure out how to get all these IPs working and all that. I think it's
gotta get the frog in the game.
We gotta get the frog in the game. Back for the frog, man.
Yeah, stretch goal.
Stretch goal, frog.
I'm actually gonna ask Dave if we can make that happen. All right, well, that's been our episode of Designer Discussion. Thank you all for joining us today. Of course, leave your comments below so we know what you want to discuss with the designers the next time. Please share the Kickstarter, and thank you for joining us.